Good morning, this is Paul reading for the 20th of January.
And this is Chris.
And we'll start with Society News for Friday, 20th of January. Tuesday there will be 2 coffee mornings held in aid of the Society on Tuesday 24th of January, the first at West Wight, end of the line cafe, from 10:30am to 12pm. And Bembridge, the Cloisters, 10:15am to 12pm. Please go along and support these if you are able. The Dolphins will be swimming this coming Tuesday evening, that's the 24th, and the waterside pool in Ryde. The swimming group has sole use of the pool during the session, and there are lifeguards in attendance. If you are interested in joining a group, please contact the Society to advise us of your swimming ability and for us to advise the waterside pool. Wednesday, the Society Coffee Morning will be held this coming Wednesday, 25th of January. Come and join us for a cup of coffee and a chat. Why not bring a friend along as well, as the coffee mornings are open to all. On Thursday, 26th, the Knitters and Natters will be meeting at Millbrook House. The group meets at 10:30am till 2pm. As well as their knitting, there is plenty of nattering, as well as volunteers that come in and read to the group during the afternoon. Friday, the Striders will be going out for their monthly stride on Friday, 27th of January. The stride will be going to Parkhurst Forest. The minibus will leave Millbrook House at 10am. For those meeting at the start point, you will need to meet at the Authority Commission car park off Forest Road. Lunch will be at the Blacksmith's Arms at 1pm. Here are the details of this month's fellowship meeting. The meeting will be held at Bethany Evangelical Church, Union Street, Newport on Saturday 28th at 3pm. The speaker this month is Mr. Peter Wells. There are various activities like hymns, quiz, story reading, short Christian message followed by tea. A collection is taken from which donations are made to the Torch Trust for the Blind. Hymn books and scripture in large print of braille are available. Further details from Mrs. Jackie Moore, telephone 520797.
And now scaffolding news. Current scaffolds are now in place in number 2 Trinity Road, Ventnor, number 32 Melville Street, Ryde, the Watch House Lane, Cowes, 11A St John's Road, Sandown, 59 St Mary's Road, Cowes, 26 Nelson Street, Ryde, 37 Alfred Street, East Cowes, and a development site at Castle Street in East Cowes. Nippert Court in West Street, Newport, the Hare Centre, 13 to 14 High Street, Ryde, Napoleon's Landing, Esplanade, Sandown, 2A York Road, Sandown, Diva Hairdressing, Ace Shoe Repairs, and a vacant premises at 91 to 94 Pyle Street, Newport, Newport Minster, St Thomas's Square, Newport, 19 George Street, Ryde, 129B School Green Road, Freshwater, the Spa Shop, number 1 West Street in Wroxall, the footway between 67 and 69 Pelham Road, Cowes, a footpath N173 Honey Hill to St Cross Lane is closed due to unsafe scaffold. Current hoardings in 272 to 283 Arctic Road, Cowes, and also McDonald's 93 to 94 St James's Street, Newport. New scaffolds due to go up on various dates. Watchbell House, Lugley Street, Newport, due up on the 23rd of January. Monsoon Indian Dining, 132 High Street, Ryde, again due up on the 23rd of January. The Anchorage Seafield Road, Seaview, scaffold is on the Rope Walk, due to go up on the 24th of January. European Court, Melville Street side in Sandown, due up on the 24th of January. 35 New Street, Newport, due to go up on the 25th of January. GKN, Clarence Road, East Cowes, due up on the 27th of January. And the Trouville Hotel, Esplanade, Sandown, due up on the 27th of January. There are new tables and chairs permits at the Blue Door Cafe, 18A St James's Square, Newport, and the Wheatsheaf Hotel, 16 St Thomas's Square, Newport. This week's In Touch. In Touch. In this week's episode, Tom Walker visits Ireland to meet 3 visually impaired women. Musician Claire Bowes lost her sight in the Omagh bombing of 1998 and has since set up her own music academy. Andrea Begley won the BBC talent TV programme The Voice in 2013. Andrea talks to Tom about her experience on the show and the impact her visual impairment has had on her career. Joanna Toner runs laughter yoga sessions for sighted and blind participants. Tom joins the session and talks to some of the people taking part.
We now move on to headline stories. Tories take control at County Hall. Following a week of shock resignations and a spectacularly ill-tempered meeting at County Hall, where one infuriated councillor refused to leave, the Tories have taken charge of the Isle of Wight Council. Conservative group leader Councillor Dave Stewart was elected leader over Island Independent Councillor Ian Stevens, securing 19 votes from Tories, UKIP and the individual members group against 15 for Councillor Stevens. The only member to abstain was Councillor Steve Stubbins, who quit this week with leader Councillor Jonathan Bacon, saying they would not be stooges for the Conservative government's war on the poor. Insults flew across the chamber, not least from Labour councillor Jeff Lumley, who branded Councillor Charles Chapman the worst chairman ever and UKIP members neo-fascists. Blimey. He refused to leave when asked by Councillor Chapman following a vote, prompting Chief Executive John Metcalfe to call the police. The new administration was promptly branded a con-UKIP alliance by the ousted independents. Councillor Lumley told the county press, I'm an elected member and I have a right to be here. I'll leave if the police come, but if anyone lays hands on me, I'll resist. Following pleas from members and council officers, he left under extreme protest before the police were required. Councillor Stewart, who said he would lead a cross-party caretaker administration until the May election, when the Conservatives would fight for full control of County Hall, criticised Councillors Bacon and Stubbins for leaving the council rudderless at such a crucial time, 1 month before the budget was due to be set. He said, they say their resignations are in protest about austerity, but it's actually about constant bickering within the executive and a complete failure to grasp how to run a council. He has appointed Councillor Stuart Hutchinson as deputy leader and is due to appoint executive members today. Yesterday, the Island Independents announced Councillor Julia Baker-Smith as their new leader. She promised to hold the ruling group to account for its budget and to put people before politics.
And another article on the same subject. The Island Independents are a failed dream, according to the former deputy leader of the Isle of Wight Council, following his resignation. With the Conservatives back in charge at County Hall, he said his group would cease to exist in its current form after the May election. He confirmed he would not stand again. When asked if the independents had fallen apart, he replied, yes. In a statement issued by the group, however, his colleagues pledged to fight to regain control of County Hall at the May election. Councillor Stubbings said, "The problem the Isle of Wight faces are down to the government's austerity agenda, and we are tired of being the stooges for that. It's possible to set a balanced budget, but it would have to be by people wedded to that agenda." When asked if the independence group was in such a shambles he would rather see the Tories run the council and leave the island at the mercy of further cuts, Councillor Stubbings said, "I find it almost unimaginable it could get any worse. The only thing that can happen is the island will die a slow death. We came in with real belief we could do something different, and in several areas we have failed." Councillor Bacon said, "Steve and I have done our best to lead the council through the difficulties it faces."
Right, change of tack now. Smoke billowed from a Whitelink ferry after a fire broke out on board yesterday. The 9 a.m. sailing from Portsmouth was heading to Fishbourne when the emergency call was made at 9:37 a.m. The fire broke out in an air conditioning unit on the bridge and was quickly extinguished. An Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service spokesman told the county press. 2 fire engines from Ryde were called to the terminal and the Coast Guard and Marine Police were standing by. A passenger said the fire was intense but praised the Whitelink team for their calm approach. "I looked out the window and saw the black smoke coming from underneath the bridge on the port side. I went out and saw the flames rushing up underneath the bridge. I couldn't see the cause of fire, but it was pretty intense. The crew didn't panic, rushed around to get water to put the fire out. We were all ushered down to the main deck saloon and all the passengers was moved to the side of the boat. The crew were very efficient." A Whitelink spokesman said there were 52 passengers and 13 crew on board the ferry at the time. Excuse me. Investigations into the incident are underway.
Protest forces Rethink on ex-Parish Wholesale. A plan to sell a building used by village businesses has been put on hold after more than 1,300 people signed a petition protesting about the scheme. The massive opposition was sparked by a decision by Bembridge Parish Council to sell one of its buildings and oust 3 local businesses. Parish councillors want to sell the former parish building at 5 to 7 High Street, Bembridge, and its attached public toilets to help fund a new community hub in the village hall, which it also owns. However, the decision was this week deferred after the plans sparked outrage from around 70 residents who attended the parish council's January meeting. Councillors said a community hub would ensure the longevity and sustainability of services in Bembridge by making use of its underused properties against a background of Isle of Wight council budget cuts. The parish council, which receives £11,750 a year rent for 5 to 7 High Street, hopes to raise up to £325,000 from its sale and secure planning permission to convert the top floor into a flat and to erect garages. In October, councillors agreed to market the building for sale this spring, but at their meeting on Tuesday, members agreed to review the project and defer any further decisions until May. Popular fresh fish outlet Captain Stan's and marketing company Conquer Cloud Innovations, which have use of the building until 2019, were warned their leases would not be renewed, while SH Tree Services will only get 3 months' notice to vacate. Mike Curtis, who co-owns Captain Stan's, said the knock-on effect would also be the closure of his Ryde outlet and the loss of 6 staff. Some residents were critical of the parish council for spending more than £8,000 on a planning consultant before it had been properly debated. Bembridge businessman Alastair said the petition sent a very clear message to councillors. Under the public radar, a decision was taken privately and being driven through regardless of the community's views and the effects upon businesses and the wider community.
Island schools will be £1 million worse off than believed, following government cuts, unions have warned. The latest figures, adjusted to include inflation and cost increases, show the money will be slashed by £5.5 million over the next 4 years, significantly more than the November's projected £4.5 million figure, which equated to 120 teaching posts. Island primary schools will lose an average of £339 per pupil, and secondary schools £477 per pupil. When the figures were first published on the school's website, as reported by the county press, Island school leaders described the situation as the worst it had ever been. The 5 worst hit schools, all primaries, will be Wroxall, Yarmouth, Oakfield, Lanes End, Cowes and St Helens. The new formula is aimed at reforming the outdated system and ensuring all schools are funded fairly. But unions have urged the government to increase payments and say anything less equates to a cut in real terms. Association of Teachers and Lecturers, ATL, Isle of Wight Branch Secretary Peter Shreve, previously said, under the guise of fairer funding, the government intends only to shift the already inadequate funding around the country rather than do the right thing, to increase it and to ensure the most disadvantaged benefit. Isle of Wight National Union of Teachers, NUT, Divisional Secretary Dominic Coughlin said this week, there are no winners, only losers. Isle of Wight schools are being forced to make decisions no head teacher or governing body should have to make, including reducing staff, increasing class sizes and reducing the range of subjects offered, simply to balance the books. This is an unacceptable state of affairs, and the NUT and ATL will continue campaigning for additional funding to protect education.
BBC One show to feature the island. Antiques Road Trip's latest island adventure will be on the screens next week. The BBC One show pits antiques experts against each other in a battle to make the most cash at auction. On Monday's episode, items bought on the mainland will go under the hammer at HRD auction rooms in Brading. The main Isle of Wight trip will be screened on Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. and will see James Braxton and Raj Bisram go head to head. It includes a trip to Dimbolam Museum and galleries in freshwater.
Red Funnel's Rethink on East Cowes scheme in tandem with appeal over original bid. Red Funnel development plans for East Cowes, which would not involve demolishing homes and businesses in Dover Road, will be discussed by planners next week. The scheme, which has been recommended for conditional approval, will be considered by the Isle of Wight Council Planning Committee on Tuesday. Last year, the authority threw out the original plan, which would have seen Dover Road homes, the White Hart pub and a Chinese takeaway knocked down to make way for a marshalling yard. The Ferry firm has lodged an appeal with the Planning Inspectorate against the refusal of the plans for a new terminal with marshalling facilities, up to 100 homes, shops, leisure and commercial premises and a 60-bedroom hotel. But in tandem it has made a fresh planning application for limited development to form the first phase of the plan. The application applies to increase by 100 cars the capacity of the marshalling yard to include Trinity Wharf and demolition of the Redux industrial unit behind Dover Road. The option retains the 2 largest sea home industrial units, protecting marine employment until the proposed deep water access to Kingston Marine Park on the Medina is completed and business can move there. In addition, the homes and businesses at Dover Road are to be retained and the threat of compulsory purchase of them withdrawn. However, Dover Road resident John Shaw said Red Funnel's long-term aim was to increase marshalling yard space, which would lead to the company wanting to knock down the houses and businesses there. He said they need to negotiate with us, which they still seem reluctant to do. Rob Stewart, Commercial Director of Aluminium Marine Consultants, gave a cautious welcome to the revised proposals. He said when there are places for us to move into Kingston Marine Business Park, that would be fantastic. I would rather work with Red Funnel, and it's nice to see they have taken notice of us.
Woodland search for missing man. Police have been trawling through Woodland off the Luckham Road coastal path this week in a last-ditch attempt to find missing man Robbie Gibson. Mr Gibson, aged 45, disappeared in June last year and was last seen in a co-op store at Shanklin, having left his home in Norwood, London, and come to the island on the catamaran from Portsmouth to Ryde. Officers from Hampshire Constabulary believed the area around the Luckham Road coastal path, where Mr Gibson liked to walk during trips to the island, was the most likely place he would be found, but the 3-day search turned up no clues. With the conclusion of this search, police have no further lines of inquiry. Supported by Isle of Wight Search and Rescue, police picked through the area with specialist victim recovery dogs. They could not search the area in this way when Mr Gibson disappeared because the vegetation was too overgrown and the dogs could not get into the undergrowth. DS John Sterling of Newport CID said, "Realistically, we are looking for a body. The family are aware of this, but they remain hopeful he is still out there somewhere. Just because he hasn't contacted anyone, it does not mean he is dead. It may be he just wanted to drop off the grid. Some people don't want to be found. However, it is a treacherous area. It could be he had an accident and became stuck somewhere and was never found." Mr Gibson was described as white, 6 feet tall, of slim build with grey-silver hair, and he wore black-rimmed Prada glasses. He was last seen wearing a blue-grey T-shirt with green-brown khaki trousers.
Protesters who mounted a vigorous campaign against the Ryde development have reacted with dismay. It has been recommended for approval by Isle of Wight council planners. Mark Gaskin, who had spearheaded protests, said there are enough grounds for councillors to go against the recommendation. "I am disappointed officers did not take them on board and have been selective in the national planning guidelines they chose to follow. Officers have recommended 80 homes can be built on fields at Westridge Farm, despite wide-ranging objections led by Ryde Town Council. The majority of the houses will be 2-storey on a 10-acre site to the south of the farm off Hope Road. Half will have 3 bedrooms, 26 2-bedrooms, and the rest will be either 1 or 4 bedrooms. More than a third will be affordable. More than 200 letters of objection were lodged with planners, centering on traffic and safety and the additional burden on services. They point to a dangerous junction with busy Marlborough Road and Hope Road residents losing all on street parking because it will be double yellow lined. Objectors complain of too much development in the Ryde area, loss of valuable farmland, the impact on the environment and the erosion of the strategic gap between Ryde and Seaview. The Isle of Wight Society, Badger Trust, Isle of Wight Ramblers and the Campaign to Protect Rural England have also objected. The report, due to be considered by the Council's Planning Committee on Tuesday, says national policies encourage sustainable development and points to the site being within Ryde's key regeneration area and immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary. It points to the development contributing to the identified need for 2,100 new dwellings in the Ryde area to be given permission by 2026. The developer has agreed to contribute 80,000 to island education, 7,500 to improve sustainable transport in the area, 20,000 to local roads and nearly 7,000 to mitigate adverse effects of development on the Solent Special Protection Area. Planners recommend approval subject to a range of conditions.
Couple forced to quit Gambia. Shanklin gift shop owner Lisa Hill Wight has described the crowds and chaos at Gambia's international airport as she and hundreds of other Britons fled the West African country this week. Lisa, 48, and her husband Derek Hill, 63, flew out to the Gambia last Friday on their annual visit to the Kafutta Numbung Nursery School, which they founded 3 years ago and support through charity work. However, they became caught up in the crisis following the refusal of long-term President Yahya Jammeh to stand down and hand over power to Adama Barrow, who won the presidential election in December. Lisa, who, along with Derek, runs Pencil Cottage and Jingle Bells in Shanklin Old Village, described how they were told to leave immediately on Wednesday morning while staying at their hotel. They were taken to the international airport in the country's capital before being put on a packed aircraft and flown to Gatwick, arriving safely back on the Isle of Wight yesterday, Thursday. Lisa said thousands of people were trying to get on planes. The airport is only about as big as Southampton. Normally you see 1 or 2 planes, but there were lots flying in and taking people back to their own countries. She has been in contact with Gambian friends since her dramatic escape, with many now afraid of how they can make a living without the tourists and some fearing military action. She said, "Without anybody visiting the country, they have nothing to survive on. All we kept hearing from the Gambians was how sorry they were." The Gambia has been in a state of political uncertainty since Jammeh refused to cede power using the courts and parliament to try to extend his 22-year rule. On Tuesday, he announced a state of emergency, prompting the UK Foreign Office to change its travel advice and warn against all but essential travel.
Dino Jigsaw nears completion. Fossilised dinosaur remains are being prepared and examined by experts at Dinosaur Isle. The near-complete skeleton of Mantisaurus, a 5-metre long herbivore from the Lower Cretaceous period, around 125 million years ago, went to the Sandown Museum in 2014. Staff and volunteers, led by museum proprietor Gary Blackwell, have been preparing the specimen for the last 2 years, carefully removing the rock encasing the bones. This week the skeleton was laid out for the first time to assess its potential for exhibition and to determine its conservation needs. Dinosaur Isle curator and general manager Dr. Martin Munt said he hoped the dinosaur will be on display at the museum later this year. The creature was found in Compton Bay in 2013 by Nick Chase, a freshwater man with more than 30 years' experience of collecting dinosaur fossils. Dr. Munt said this is the most complete, larger-sized dinosaur to be found in the UK for many, many years. It is a spectacularly rare discovery. A find like this allows us to learn more about this type of dinosaur and means we can put together our other partial finds into perspective.
Congestion fee for Ireland urged. A congestion charge would be on Labour's agenda if it takes control of County Hall at the May election. A strategy was badly needed to deal with the number of cars on the roads, he told the authority's scrutiny committee last week. Until I run this council, I will be able to do nothing to stop car after car coming into Newport with just one person in them. A congestion charge is the only answer, he told the meeting. A parking strategy for the whole island has been drawn up for the Isle of Wight Council by consultants. It was approved by the council's executive and is designed to reduce conflict between residents and commuters competing for spaces and iron out charging and anomalies. Most notably, congestion charges apply to London with the aim of reducing traffic and pollution and raising revenue. Rolling out charges to other cities and towns has been promoted by the government as a way of promoting use of public transport, but it is opposed by commuters who see it as yet another tax on motorists.
Work finally underway at Royal York Hotel. Scaffolding now surrounds part of a landmark ride building which has been disused for years. Repair work on a Royal York Hotel in George Street has been welcomed by residents who criticise its deteriorating condition in the heart of the town's conservation area. The owner of the Art Deco building was in April 2015 granted planning permission for a 30-room hotel and 4 flats. Planners decided he had complied with a planning condition that work should start before December 2015. But critics continue to complain about the appearance of the building with its broken windows and peeling paintwork. The condition of the Royal York and other buildings in the town led Ryde Town Council to take the initiative and pledge £10,000 to fund the Isle of Wight Council taking legal action to force developers to act. The town's council planning committee chairman Tim Wakely, who championed the enforcement initiative, welcomed work taking place. He said, "I'm delighted to see scaffolding going up. I look forward to seeing exactly the extent of the work taking place. It has an important, iconic building which has caused great concern for many years. Royal York was a thriving hotel before it was sold, and in its real heyday hosted the 69 Club, which in the 60s and 70s hosted some of the biggest names in rock and pop." Nick Spiker, who gained planning permission for the redevelopment of the hotel, was unavailable for comment.
Good, bad and ugly of Isle of Wight food. Whatever happened to trout Cleopatra? If you pine for the days when dishes on menus had proper names, rather than a list of ingredients with a cooking method and allergens, coupled with a sneaking suspicion gourmet burgers aren't all that special, the Wight Good Food Guide is for you. It is compiled annually by Angela Hewitt, a self-styled gourmet on a mission to seek out the island's best restaurants, pubs and cafes. In no particular order, her 5 favourite establishments during the last year were Mojack's of Cowes, home of the only correctly cooked confit duck leg she has ever eaten on the island, Off the Rails, Yarmouth, the Red Lion, Freshwater, the Old Smithy, God's Hill, which boasts the best banoffee pie, and the Bonchurch Inn, which serves a tiramisu 10 times better than Jamie's Italian. She has recommended many more, with extra praise for little gems including Mingella's ginger ice cream, the cream tea at Chesil Pottery, and the quiche made by the farmers market regulars Twins, gluten-free. Today, eateries have far more challenges than when I ran a restaurant, said Angela. They are virtually expected to become part of the National Health Service, catering for an increasing amount of allergies, gluten-free, wheat-free, nut-free, dairy-free, egg-free, not forgetting the political leaning meat-free. Such restrictions can stymie creativity. A food author and chef proprietor at the award-winning Lugley's restaurant from 1980 to 1994, Angela knows what she likes and, more to the point, what she doesn't. She said it before and she'll say it again. Badly made risotto, cold plates and reheated pastry are unacceptable, while charges for people paying by card are a disgrace. A fan of old-school cooking? Avocado pear, anyone? Who laments the rise of pork belly over the traditional loin? Angela's reviews are peppered with recipes and reminiscence from her chef days.
I've been here 18 years. It's never been this bad. We just cannot go on this way. Elective surgery at St Mary's Hospital was ground to a halt as top surgeons fear the Isle of Wight could lose a service altogether if the bed crisis continues. With the hospital's 252 beds full and additional 23 beds open in areas of the hospital not designed to be used that way, some staff have told the county press they struggle to see a light at the end of the tunnel. At a meeting of senior health bosses last Thursday, it was revealed one patient had been forced to wait in the accident emergency department for almost 12 hours last Friday night, something Isle of Wight NHS Trust Chief Executive Karen Baker said was unacceptable. Mrs Baker said there was a danger of the hospital's black alert status becoming normal and said they had been forced to use the hospital's day surgery unit to accommodate other patients, leading to the cancellation of operations. Dr Jonathan Gardner, a consultant orthopaedic surgeon at St Mary's, said he feared for the future. We have no escape valve when things get too busy. I've been here for more than 18 years and it has never been anywhere near this bad. It needs a system where we can in some way isolate those beds from the emergency service to continue this work, because eventually if we don't do this work we will lose these facilities from the island. We're losing the income these facilities bring in, we're losing the confidence of our patients and the reputation of the department to the GPs, and we just cannot go on this way. I would imagine this is a discussion going on in almost every NHS unit across the country at the moment. Space is so sparse that on 2 occasions in the last month the hospital was forced to introduce mixed-sex wards for a few hours. Dr Nicola Turner, Deputy Chief Operating Theatre at St Mary's, Operating Officer, said it was a rare occurrence and didn't last long, but the hospital had to report the breach and would face a fine. Patients were facing numerous appointment cancellations and long waiting lists, and staff were feeling equally frustrated with the situation. Dr John Scadden, a consultant orthopaedic surgeon at St Mary's, said he simply could not do his job as there was no way for him to operate on patients. I can't do what I'm trained to do. I can't help the people I want to help. We can't do what we're paid to do, he said. We don't have any beds left. They have all been taken by acute medical patients. Therefore, we've ground to a halt. We need beds that we adjust for our elective surgeries that cannot be touched by or poached by other patients, which is very difficult in this environment when we have a huge reduction in the number of beds over the past few years, and that has left us in this situation. We have great sympathy for patients. These are people who are in a lot of pain. These are people who have severe arthritic challenges and they can't function at home and have no solution to the problem until they have an operation. Some people have had operations cancelled 3 or 4 times over the past month, waiting for these hip or knee or shoulder operations. They're not going to get them in the foreseeable future if this problem continues. Last week, St Mary's announced patients will be offered treatment in Southampton in a bid to ease pressures, but Dr Scadden said it was not a solution to the problem. People don't want to go to mainland, and you have to look at the situation in Southampton and Portsmouth, he said. They are all on black alert. They can't get their own patients in. There's no capacity in those 2 areas in the NHS sector to do these operations. Island patients should have the right to have their operation on the island, where we can look after them and their families can visit them. They shouldn't be forced to go to the mainland. Patients are hugely inconvenienced by cancellations, and it affects their families, partners and even pets, Dr Gardner said. I've got patients who have had to go into residential homes for a number of months simply because the pain is too severe and they cannot walk or cope at home. I've had an individual who has brought his family over from America on 2 occasions to look after him after an operation we have subsequently cancelled on the day. So there are appalling stories behind every one of these cancellations. The hospital's emergency department is no exception to the massive pressures. The lack of beds mean getting people passed on to the wards once they have had emergency treatment is extremely difficult. Robin Beale, clinical lead for the emergency department and medical assessment unit, said the department had been seeing an average of 130 to 140 patients a day. Our waiting times over the past few weeks have been poor, unfortunately, he said. The rationale for that has been the number of patients who have been coming through the door and the inability for us to shift patients from the department onto the wards. The flow of patients is significantly poorer than it's ever been. Our numbers have gone up, but not massively, but the bread and butter minor injuries such as cuts and grazes have proportionally gone down massively. But the complexity of the patients we're seeing is really quite significant. The expectation from folk is also increasing massively. I understand that. We all want things to be done right first time, and it should be. However, we're not McDonald's. You can't turn up at 3 a.m. with a 6-month history of backache expecting to be sorted out, but that happens. You might work at your McDonald's at 3 a.m. and get satisfied, but urgent health care is more difficult.
Homes sought for refugees. Private landlords with available properties are being urged to get in touch with the Isle of Wight Council after plans to resettle 5 Syrian refugee families on the island were approved. They are due to arrive in April, after the plans were unanimously supported at last Thursday's meeting of the Council Executive. Addressing concerns raised about a lack of housing on the island, Councillor Julia Baker-Smith said, "There are concerns it may displace local people waiting for housing. I want to offer reassurance that won't be the case, as we are seeking suitable accommodation through the private sector to help these needy families." She appealed for private landlords with available properties to get in touch. Describing the plans as flawed, UKIP councillor Darryl Pitcher said, "If we can afford to rent houses, whether from the private or public sector, they could go to people living rough on the Isle of Wight, but we have chosen not to do that. That is the issue behind people's disquiet, and I agree with them." However, Deputy Leader Councillor Steve Stubbings said the plans were supported by the island community. Despite some comments that have been made by people who do not live in the same century as the rest of us, most people agreed we should help those in need, he said.
New head of health body appointed. A new chairman has been appointed to the Isle of Wight Clinical Commissioning Group, CCG, the body responsible for buying in healthcare for the island. Dr. Michelle Legg will take over the role from current chairman Dr. John Rivers, who finished his term of office on March the 31st. Dr. Legg, a GP at Tower House Ryde and currently the Dementia Older People CCG clinical lead, will be working with Dr. Rivers until the end of March to provide a smooth transition, and will continue her GP responsibilities in tandem with her new role. Last month, Dr. Rivers sparked controversy when he used the example of mass murderer Dr. Harold Shipman, who in suggesting patient feedback was not always reliable for judging the quality of rural GP surgeries. He was responded to a comment from Health Watch Isle of Wight that most positive patient feedback came from rural surgeries. The CCG has announced some rural surgeries could be closed under the proposed Sustainability and Transformation Plan. Dr. Legg, who grew up on the island, began her medical career as a hospitalised doctor on the mainland, and in 2004 returned to the Isle of Wight with her family to live and work as a GP. She has a special interest in dementia and older people's health, and championing many initiatives, including developing Ryde as a dementia-friendly town. She lives with her partner, also a GP, and their 2 teenage boys. And it's goodbye from Paul.
And it's goodbye from Chris.
And now, more of the January the 20th, the Weekender. And your readers today are
Madeline.
And Peter Boffin.
And we're starting off with some of the letters. And this is from Phaedra Kelly in Ryde. Bullies should not win the day. It is no secret one has never been a fan of Charlotte Houghton. What she did to me via the power of her column in 2002 was nothing short of cowardly bullying, and I was not allowed a right of reply at the time. But now I suspect she may have become a victim to something very similar, and that, if so, is unacceptable. She has offended many, and each in their turn have seen their view in print. The last she upset was the so-called LGBTQ community, who enjoyed a full page of their noise immediately afterwards, and that ought to have been sufficient. I read her piece and cannot, in conscience, see wherein she could have offended. In my view, she carefully posited open questions, which is in no sense bigoted behaviour, quite the reverse, in fact. Her attempts at wit are what they are. They appeal to an audience yet extant, which I do not agree should have to go without a voice through her, for how else shall we evolve them, and with them, if they are unable to put a premise for debate? And I do know how it feels to be without a voice on matters which directly address me and mine. Genocide has a nature. It firstly directly eliminates its victims, culture and voice, undermining it in the media which it then takes over. Perhaps she really has only had enough and decided to retire, but then perhaps she has suffered what legal scholar Harry Galvin called a heckler's veto, the theory a hostile reaction of a listener-reader to a speaker-writer may be made grounds for silencing them in advance. I am not popular with her, but nor am I with the sexual politicians, and little do I care. If she has come a cropper in that way, as a free-thinking, independent gender transient, I say no, not in the country of my birth. Let the woman write. A democratic system must perforce uphold a much more discussive process, or we are all lost to hypocrisy and decline. And there's an editor's footnote added here. Charlotte decided to stop writing her county press column because she wished to pursue new projects, a decision not affected by the reaction to her piece on Isle of Wight pride.
And here's a rather lengthy letter by Stuart Clements, who lives in Carisbrooke, round the corner from here, and who says that National Health Service deserve more support. Because, apparently, improvements in my health meant I was discharged by my community heart nurse last week, and my mind turned to the kind of care and treatment I'd had from the staff at St Mary's Hospital since needing emergency treatment due to a heart failure in June. I appreciate that there are some good people who may feel anger or sadness when reading votes of thanks to the staff of St Mary's, because their experience will be very different from mine. Across the National Health Service there is evidence of bad experiences, either as patients or loved ones in hospital. I do feel when thanks and appreciation are due, they should not be left unsaid, especially with the pressures upon such hard-pressed staff at this time. In the first week of June, I needed urgent care and arrived at A&E at about 7 a.m, and over the next 13 hours I was assessed, drugs dispensed to me, scanned and generally cared for. And I was left in a chilly corridor while I waited for a bed. The trolley was not very comfortable, but I was in a side cubicle and checked by kindly and concerned staff. While parked next to the electronic chart waiting to move, I could see the list of people who had entered A&E during that day. Pardon me. My long wait was not typical. Virtually all people had been assessed and treated in a very short time. I was moved to the MAU ward. I was met by kind, concerned and professional staff. The ward was clean and appeared well run. I next moved to Whippingham ward. A number of years ago, my wife had been in this ward and had to endure a dirty environment, rushed and unhelpful staff. But this time, I found the ward was clean, staff professional, kind, attentive and well organised. I had not known what to expect, having had no experience as a patient since 2003, and I was impressed by all aspects of the caring atmosphere I experienced. I was finally moved to the cardiac centre and was especially impressed with the way it operated. I felt staff cared about me, my needs and how to support me. The way the team worked together was, to me, seamless. They cooperated so well with each other and just got the jobs done. To see such pressurised people maintaining such efficiency with kindness was humbling. I felt proud to have been cared for by these professionals. Overall, it was possible to see how incredibly busy the nurses and doctors were, but it didn't detract from their care and thoughtfulness. I didn't expect this at all, and it was very impressive and reassuring. I thank all the staff, from my consultant, the doctors, nurses, and to the guy who kept the toilets in Whippingham Ward, the best I've ever come across in a hospital, and I left St Mary's full of appreciation and thankful I was cared for so well. The one thing that saddened me was seeing staff working against the obvious shortages that existed in equipment and staffing at times. Staff worked to cover gaps and bypass the problems. The team on duty just got on, shared jobs, and ensured patients did not suffer. I felt so fortunate to have had such care, and that I am fit enough to write this letter. I also feel anger. We have a local MP who is more concerned about tigers and insurance for ride-on mowers than standing up for our local National Health Service, and a leader of a government who is unprepared to see the urgency needed to resolve the crisis, which is a financial one in the National Health Service. St Mary's staff deserve far better support than our leaders are prepared to provide.
And here's a letter from Ben Houston of Newport, and it says, "Thanks for the laughs. I was very sorry to read Charlotte Houghton is leaving the county press. Although I don't always agree with her sentiments, her column was the only section of county press that literally made me laugh out aloud. She had a wonderful turn of phrase and a mischievous sense of humour. She will be very sadly missed by many regular county press readers. Perhaps I can ask you to pass on to her my very best wishes, with a special thanks for all the chuckles she has brought forth over the years."
And here's another letter from Alastair Bridle of Cowes, again about the National Health Service a bit. "On January the 4th, I had a serious fall from my pushbike on Sylvan Drive in Newport, opposite the school, at about 9 a.m. May I thank the kind and considerate people who came to my aid. I don't recall much except a lady in her pyjamas, who might have been a nurse, helping until an ambulance arrived. And after several days of outstanding care from the staff in St Mary's Hospital, I am upright and recovering well." So clearly, this is a good place to be if you're not very well.
And this is from RichardFerraro of Bonchurch. "Is there demand for harbour plan? Read the front page story on Newport Harbour in the county press of the 13th of January. I have 35 years of experience in commercial and residential development across the UK. If there's one thing I've learned, it is that developments don't create demand. It is the other way around. Demand creates development. Therefore, I'd be interested to know which specialist market experts have confirmed in market assessment reports the colossal demand in various commercial sectors necessary to attract the investment for the development reported in your paper. The sectors mentioned include tourism, leisure, residential, retail, offices, start-ups, conference and hotel, and a museum of national significance. If the demand for all of the above can't be demonstrated by normal methods used in the commercial world of property development, then investment will not be forthcoming and the development will not happen. I therefore urge all parties to focus at the outset on the assessment of commercial demand, not the physical possibilities of the site."
Now here's a a letter called Lots of Benefits of Sandown Proposal, and it's from Marion Cook of the Sandown Town Council, so they know what they're talking about. And she says, I refer to the part of the letter from Alan Jones about Sandham Gardens. The letter was on the 6th of January, apparently. Perhaps development is an unfortunate word to use in some respects. A lot of people immediately think of housing and building development. What will happen is development, continuation, improvement of what is there. It is a leisure area. The Nando Burger King name check was only an example of a business that, if they took space, would pull in other smaller businesses that would benefit from a big name. In much the same way, shopping malls like to get in what they call, I believe, an anchor business. That's Marks and Spencer, perhaps, or John Lewis. That will attract others to take up space nearby because they know that these well-known retailers will attract shoppers. The skate park, the Stephen Jenkins play area, the football pitch, the Addison's area, the multi-play area will all remain free access areas controlled by the town council. The whole area will be developed, with the town council being consulted at all stages. The town council can object to some tenants or developments, and as such, the town council will reject any project that would be detrimental to the place and to Sandown in general. And the negotiations between the town council and heritage attractions has been ongoing for some time, but with all projects, until there is something definite happening, there is nothing to report at meetings. Now things are happening, they are reported, explained, and councillors are discussing the finer points. This deal can only be seen as beneficial to Sandown as we retain Sandham grounds for the benefit of the community. The town council is relieved of the expense of rebuilding the Crazy Golf completely, the cost of wages, maintenance in terms of grass cutting, flower bed maintenance, and the cleansing and maintenance of public toilets. More visitors to Sandham Gardens will mean more visitors to the rest of the town. It all has a knock-on effect. Heritage Attractions is keen to start moving with the acquisition of planning permission for beach huts along the Culver Parade from the bandstand to the boating lake area. This is the area where there used to be beach huts in the early 1900s. And unlike the earlier ones, these will be single-storey at road level with an area underneath for storage or use as a pop-up stall. Perhaps a craft stall or an artisan sweet shop. Who knows what creative ideas people will have. And I'm glad Alan is behind us in the project, and I hope a lot of the residents will be like-minded. I know it is the intention to put the proposals on view to the public as soon as there are firm proposals in the offing. So that's what Marion Cook of the Sandown Town Council believes will help this done.
And this is from the Reverend Canon Graham Morris from Ryde. And Ryde tops at Christmas. We felt we must write and express our thanks to the team responsible for the Christmas decorations in Ryde. The Christmas trees were fantastic, especially the trees placed within the main shopping areas of Union Street and High Street. The trees at Five Ways Junction and Binstead also provided a wonderful welcome to this great island town. Coupled to this, the efforts made by businesses and shopkeepers in town, the Christmas spirit in Ryde was brilliant. May we also express our sincere thanks to the town clerks, the Ryde Town Council, the Business Association, and all who contributed to make Ryde the best place for Christmas decorations on the island.
And here's a letter from H. Bolton of Binstead, who said, in our road, a cul-de-sac, we get a lot of carers up and down every day. Last Friday there was a sheet ice down the hill and spreading across the T-junction. I rang Island Roads and a very helpful young lady said she would get someone down to it. She said our road was not on the list for gritting, but if we had a problem again, to let them know. I said, well, as I have you on the phone, there is a pothole right outside my house and everyone seems to hit it. I came home that afternoon to find the hole filled. Thanks, Island Road.
And this is from Ed Blake at Ventnor Haven Fishery. Town and the council need us. Your article about the cost of maintaining Ventnor Haven, that was in the County Press on the 13th of January, contains a significant inaccuracy. Ventnor Haven Fishery, not the Blake family, as stated in the Isle of Wight Council report, holds a lease on part of the haven, which stands on our fishery business. We do not lease the entire haven, and the story has led people to question if this is now the case. Ventnor Haven Fishery and Cheetah Marine's leases and business rates bring in around £60,000 a year to Isle of Wight Council coffers. Between the two businesses, we employ around 70 full-time people and bring in millions of pounds worth of business to a town which is dependent on the haven's existence.
And here's the last letter. It's from Pamela Miles of Shalfleet, who says, "It would be illuminating to know exactly how much money was spent on the My Life, a Full Life programme and what, if anything, is achieved. I understand the programme is due to end this spring. It was, I believe, a 5-year initiative funded by the Isle of Wight National Health Trust, the Isle of Wight Council and the local clinical commissioning group. Its primary objective was said to be improving the coordination of health and social care for the elderly and those with long-term conditions. I know a lot of money was spent on publicity material, press releases and brochures were produced. People were asked what they would like in an ideal world, and a lot of worthy ideas and strategies were announced. I don't, however, understand what was actually achieved, and at what cost." Well, that's what Pamela Miles is saying. I don't know what the actual total cost was, and I've never actually heard of what she's been talking about, so there we are.
So we're moving on now, and we're looking back. So, looking back 100 years on January the 20th, 1917. In the same week, Conservative Party leader Andrew Bonar Law condemned the wartime atrocities in Belgium. A collection for children living in the ravaged country was arranged on the Isle of Wight. Contributions came in from across the island, raising a total of £44 2 and 8 halfpenny, or in today's money, £2,753. Having run the tobacco collection since the outbreak of the war, the county press was forced to close the fund because of circumstance outside of our control. The tobacco fund, which had been providing gifts of tobacco and cigarettes for soldiers at the front, was to be closed at the end of the month.
Yeah. So what date was that?
That was January the 20th,
100 years
1970.
ago?
Mm-hmm.
Ah, well, here's something a bit more up to date. Some of us may even were there. 75 years ago, on January the 24th, 1942. A number of complaints were made to the council after the Ministry of Supply contracted local builders to remove safety railings around the island. It was commented some of the roads where the railings had been removed looked as though several bombs had fallen there. Although there was little argument against the need to requisition raw materials for the war effort, it was the manner in which it was done that sparked the ire of reticence. Proper permission from the ratepayers had not been sought, plus the support pillars were destroyed in what was described as a quite unnecessary fashion. So there, 75 years ago, that was what it was like.
And 50 years ago, on January the 14th, 1967, judges were unanimous in their praise of the high standard of entries at Cowes Fanciers Society Adult Stock Show. A range of rabbits, poultry, pigeons and cage birds were presented at the St James's Hall in East Cowes. Also, a 2,155-tonne East German freighter beached on the mother bank off Wootton and subsequently caught fire. Around 40 firefighters tackled the blaze in freezing conditions, and finally, after nearly 3 days, the flames subsided.
And apparently 25 years ago, on January the 17th, 1992, that was when I came to the island. It says, it doesn't mention it, it just says a scheme to build 10 low-cost homes for local first-time buyers at Topland came under fire from local residents. Concerns were raised over the loss of amenity space and an increase in traffic which could present a danger to children. Wow.
And just 10 years ago, on January the 19th, 2007, a swan population explosion on Ryde Canoe Lake was branded a health hazard by local councillor Henry Adams. The Isle of Wight Council was urged to reduce the number of swans and test the water for bacteria levels before using the lake for pedalos. There have been reports of sickness associated with the lake, and my fear is it is caused by the large number of swans there now, said Councillor Adams. And also, 2 families were lucky to escape after storm-force winds smashed a tree into their car. Sarah Newnham, 28, her husband Keith, 28, and their daughter Bryony, 5, were travelling along Wootton High Street when part of a sycamore sheared off and crashed onto the roof and bonnet. Passer-by Sharon Sheath and her daughter Lorna also narrowly avoided serious injury when the tree missed them by just a metre as it fell.
Well, yeah. Now we've got here something by John Moreno. He's the man who goes to the local theatres and sees everything that's going on. And he says there was a star-studded lineup for Jack up to the 80s. And early bird tickets are now on sale for the hotly anticipated Jack Up the 80s weekend with Nick Kershaw headlining this year's event. The festival, which will take place at the new venue, Smallbrook Stadium, Ashy, over the weekend of August the 12th and 13th. It will also feature Aussie heartthrob Jason Donovan, soul sensation Alexander O'Neill, power pop favourites from The Jam, which includes original Jam bass guitarist Bruce Foxton, 1981 Eurovision winners Bucks Fizz, and party pop aces The Real Thing. And there's a weekend early bird and Friday night party tickets will be on sale at reduced price for a limited time only from Monday, available from the County Press shop in Newport and Osborne's Menswear in Ryde. So there you are. John Moreno is telling you about this wonderful show if you want to save up and buy it.
The Welsh National Opera is coming to the Mayflower, Southampton with Love's Poisoned Chalice. On offer is a new production of Swiss composer Frank Martin's Le Van Herbe, Puccini's La Bohème, and also from Puccini, Madame Butterfly. Welsh National Orchestra Artistic Director David Pountney said, "To bring Madame Butterfly and La Bohème together in one season is a luxurious offering for our audiences." The WNO will be at the Mayflower from April the 25th until April the 29th.
And here's another little thing. If you're keen on blues band, the Baggy Wintles Blues Band will be performing at Bembridge next weekend. The group will be playing at the Pilot Boat Hotel Inn next Friday, January the 27th. And the band consists of Frank Aiello, who does the vocals, Heather Wilson, the keyboard and guitar, Jim Luke, the guitar and mandolin, and Alan Moore, who does the drums. So if that made all sense to you and you want to go and see the Ballywrinkles, off you go to the Pilot Boat Inn. And the beer there is quite good.
And an authority on dark nebulae will be giving a talk at the next meeting of the Vectis Astronomical Society. The talk by Owen Brazel, entitled Shrouds of Night, Dark Nebulae, will be held at the Pavilion, Watery Lane, Newchurch. That's next door to the Society's observatory, next Friday, January the 27th. A dark nebula is a type of interstellar cloud that is so dense it obscures the light from objects behind it. Mr. Brazel, an expert observer of deep sky objects, will discuss the phenomena and talk about how to observe dark nebulae and the challenges involved. At the end of the evening, if the skies are clear, the telescopes in the observatory will be available for use. The talk starts at 7:30.
And now, some Wight memories and haunting tales of White Island. Not White Island, but White Island. Oh, well, never mind. By Richard Wright. 100 years ago, the active campaign for women's suffrage may have been suspended following the outbreak of war, but that did not hold back the strength of feeling for long. The tide was inexorable, and conflict provided only a temporary dam to the flow of feeling. Part of the movement in 1916 was island author Ethel C. Hargrove. She was clearly proud of her gender, publishing The Garden of Desire in her own name rather than a masculine nom de plume, and even in those relatively enlightened times, compared to the Victorian era, might have aided the publication. It brought a brief review in the county press, which described the book as politically driven. Few copies remain, but Newport's reference library had one, signed by the author on March the 27th, 1947, and originally available from Sandown Urban District's Free Library. It was published in London and on the island by W.H. Findon and Co., a name still most familiar in Sandown. The county press of the day said, "The Garden of Desire tackled issues such as women's suffrage and economic disparity." Much of the book was set in London, Denmark and White Island, a clearly fictionalised version of our fair isle. The book has a measure of flowery alliteration. It's full of thorn-less roses and fruit falling ripe and luscious. It's a big garden containing many paths, Ethel tells me, all leading to the golden river that runs into the sea forever. But it also catalogues a woman's battle for independence, the central character spurning wealth and comfort for satisfaction and recognition as a person and not an extension of her husband, aspiration then in its infancy. It very little appears to be known about the author, although her interests in travel and the occult are recorded in other books, including The Psychic Significance of the Horse and Dog, published in the Occult Review of 1919. She cited examples of horses shying on an island road where there had previously been a fatal accident, and that of a family collie dog called Pat. 6 months after Pat's death, the faithful hound reappeared during the family's annual holiday to their favourite island beach, and the owner reached out only to find the dog was a shade with no substance. She was prompted by the apparition to hastily run back to the shore, where she'd left her 2 small sons of 6 and 8. She found the younger boy in deep water and helpless, just able to save his life, thanks, she said, to the canine SOS. 4 years earlier, on New Year's Eve, 1915, the author recounted she and a friend visited what is reputed to be the most haunted place on the island, Knighton Gorges, the long demolished mansion in which only the stone gate pillars remained then, as today, as a reminder of a house and plague and tragedy. The pair claimed they saw the house as it had been, heard the baying of dogs and the sound of carriages, and witnessed a man in 18th century costume raising a glass. Miss Hargrove repeated the claims in her book England's Garden Isle, and she wrote, "A few minutes before midnight, a flood of melody rose from the site of the former mansion. It was varied in character, dance music, played on a harpsichord, and a slow and stately Georgian minuet. Then a duet between tenor and soprano voices was heard. At 12, the party seemed to break up. A pistol or gun was fired, dogs brayed, and the sound of carriage wheels was heard." Thus she cemented Knighton's reputation, and her writing was used to enhance it still further in later publication. Now, does anyone know more of Ethel C. Hargroves? Words and photographs can be emailed to richardsw at Isle of Wight's cpmail.co.uk, or sent to Richard Wright at the County Press, Brannan House, 123 Pyle Street, Newport, PO 31ST. So, if you know more about the lady, let them know, and they'll write another article about her.
So as we don't have Charlotte now, we have Alan Marriott, and he's saying, "I'm not booking a suite just yet." "Dare to dream" was the quote that sprang to mind when I wrote the Towering Vision headline for last week's County Press front page. Developer Peter Dale has unveiled a massive scheme to transform Newport's shabby-looking harbour area with lock gates, a bridge over the Medina, a museum, business studios, shops, apartments and, oh yes, a 100-metre tower on the site of, somewhat ironically, the existing Isle of Wight planning office. County press journalists, being the cynics we are, automatically went into, oh yeah, pull the other one mode, and the thought of a project on this scale does beg a million questions. But this is a time when regeneration is the island buzzword, and the council has recruited a team to breathe much-needed economic life into the lungs of Wight. So, what if we dare to dream? How can we help Mr. Dale's vision towards reality? Last week, the County Press design team, that sounds grander than it is, mocked up a graphic of the 100-metre tower in the shape of London's Shard in situ on the banks of the Medina. But what if some original thought was applied to the project? We could use the motive of the Black Knight and Black Arrow rockets developed here, turning the tower into a giant space rocket ready to blast the Isle of Wight off into a new era of prosperity. We could use the site as an entry area for Carl Feeney's much talked about tunnel to the mainland, the tower's underground area providing the way to the North Island with this cap of capitalism on top, showing the Isle of Wight welcomes all for business and pleasure. It could be a real statement of wealth that Mr. Feeney's subterranean dream will engender. My personal favourite, though, comes from a thought bubble out of the mouth of Mr. Dale, who told the County Press last week he envisaged a slide, the biggest in the world, twisting its way down the outside of the building, much in the way that casino in Las Vegas is topped by a jaw-dropping, scary roller coaster. As previously stated, London has its Shard, Seattle has its Space Needle, and Paris has its Eiffel. So why not create our own finger into the sky as the Malishag, a 330-foot temple to fun and frivolity, with a helter-skelter down the outside, eyes which light up in different colours, and a true Malishag, as a caterpillar in Grockle speak, have the ability to turn into a beautiful Glanville fritillary butterfly in the summer and fly away. Because, let's face it, John Giddings isn't going to want its occupants getting a free show of the superstars on the yards away Isle of Wight Festival main stage come June time. OK, I may have got a bit silly, but my point is a serious one. In 30 years of working at the County Press, I have become a little world wary when such ideas are floated. How many golf courses, leisure centres, light railways and even cable cars over the Medina have been mooted, only to be tucked away in that very big file marked, "It never happened." Cynicism is a negative trait, and not a very pleasant one. But when Mr. Dale declines to tell us much about his backing or his own business history, you will forgive me for not putting my name down for a 35th floor suite with fine views of the mainland just yet.
Now, some more from John Moreno, who is not talking about shows that he's seen, but this is written about the secret army that had been trained to resist the Germans if there had been a Second World War invasion. As John goes on, interest has been reignited in an island wartime secret bigger than that of the pipeline under the ocean project, and which still holds great mystery today. It follows the recent discovery of an underground bunker, one of several dotted around the island, unearthed at Woodland in Down End near Arreton, which was used by highly secret, specially trained groups of volunteers tasked to defend the island. With the threat of a German invasion a very real possibility, and the island the closest and most obvious target from which to launch an assault on mainland Britain, Winston Churchill turned to terror tactics as a last resort to defend it. In preparation, some 15 auxiliary units made up of civilians and part of the British resistance were established on the island in 1940 as a reaction to the German invasion of the Channel Islands. The Nazis were also operating numerous port and air bases along the French coastline within easy reach of British waters. The volunteers were assigned to observe the English Channel for German raids and to protect vital elements of the island's infrastructure. But the biggest fear was a possible D-Day failure in June 1944, which could have resulted in a Nazi counter-invasion. As D-Day neared, the resistance was told fellow volunteers were to be brought to the island under a cloak of secrecy to help defend it. Between 600 and 900 men were sent from as far afield as Durham, Yorkshire, Lincolnshire and East Anglia, not knowing their final destination until they arrived on the island. They had to guard Pluto and other important island installations, such as a building disguised as a hospital, a top-secret communication centre that hid a vital communications landline laid under the English Channel and into occupied France. The island's guerrilla units had to defend a coastline of about 57 miles during the war years that preceded D-Day. However, with only 100 or so local volunteers, it was almost impossible task trying to patrol it, especially at night. With very little information on exactly how these patrols operated, such was the level of secrecy involved, it is believed only 2 or 3 men would have been sent out to cover sections of the coastline. Their capabilities were stretched, however, with many resistance men having important war work, which prevented them from patrolling. To maintain the secrecy of their role, all were issued with Home Guard uniforms and operated under the guise of the Hampshire Auxiliaries 203 Battalion GHQ Reserve. The men were well trained in using guerrilla or terrorist tactics should the unthinkable have happened, and they were well equipped with weaponry. Above all, they had to be ruthless, sworn to secrecy, so much so their own families were totally oblivious to their roles. The units were well organised and operated covertly from underground bunkers known as Operation Bases or OBs, located in mainly woodland areas across the island. And there were 3, possibly 4, auxiliary units in Newport, as well as ones in Cowes and East Cowes, Ryde, the West Wight, the Sandown Bay area, Whitwell and other rural districts. It's only in recent years some of these bunker systems have been uncovered, revealing some of their own secrets on how the units would live and sleep should the Nazi invasion of the island have become a terrible reality. The OB discovered at Downend was a typical rural setup, which comprised 2 buried Nissen huts with a concrete tunnel to link them with an entrance at each end. The primary requirements for OBs were they should be concealed, habitable and reasonably waterproof. A standard design was used, comprising an underground chamber with a vertical shaft at one end leading to the main entrance, together with an escape passage at the other end. The entrances were secured with well-camouflaged trapdoors, and because of the camouflage and secrecy associated with these structures, they are generally poorly represented in records of known sites from the period. Last year, an OB was discovered on private land near Ryde. The entire roof had collapsed, with none of the roof construction materials remaining. What was the inside of the main chamber was mostly covered in soil, although it was still possible to see a few pieces of the old metal bunks or beds that would have been inside it. This island's secret army were the first British servicemen in the war to be issued with the Thompson submachine gun, the Browning automatic rifle and the Piat anti-tank missile, all designed for effective close water combat. A lot of those who lived in the countryside tended to use their own weapons, such as shotguns and crossbows, and were supplied with the necessary ammunition, but they were also issued with a Sten gun and the .22 Enfield sniper's rifle, which could either fire high-velocity bullets at long range or subsonic bullets for virtual silence if the contact was relatively close. Those who received these weapons were told they were for killing German officers and for picking off tracker dogs before they came too near, but several members admitted they were also intended to be used on locals who they suspected enemy collaborators. Suspects would have included police officers, some parish councillors, as well as farm owners, and the German and Italian prisoners of war working on their land. In the 1950s, an arms and ammo dump for the Godsill Patrol was found when a field close to a barn in Stenbury Manor Farm was ploughed for the first time in years. The plough unearthed grenades and explosives. The resistance men had to be trained to use all this weaponry and in the dark art of guerrilla warfare. It was intense and took many hours. All groups were separately trained by specialist officers, both on the ground and at centres such as Newport Drill Hall, as well as having secret meetings away from their families and everyone else. Also, to help maintain the strength of secrecy, the less fellow units knew of each other, the better, although some were members of more than one auxiliary patrol unit. Very little is known about the individuals who took part in this great secret, which 99.9% of the island was oblivious to. In fact, records kept of meetings are extremely rare. But recently, the menu for a special dinner function for the Arreton unit, held at the Masonic Hall Ryde on January the 20th, 1945, was unearthed. It bears the signatures of unit members, but amusingly, one wanted to remain silent by signing his name, Joe Starlin. Also, a photograph of a West Wight patrol taken at the former Sun Inn, Wellow, came to light in February last year. Sam Biles, whose grandfather Harold Biles was a volunteer and believes at least 22 of the 42 men identified in the photograph were of farming families. If you recognise any of the men in the picture, contact the British Resistance Archive at www.staybehinds.com. Despite the lack of historical accounts relating to island patrolmen, there are, however, some interesting anecdotes relating to some of the volunteers who came to the island in the summer of 1944. Among them was Herbert Bowman of the Thorpe St Andrew Patrol from Norwich, who arrived on Sandown 3 weeks before the D-Day invasion. He had to guard the Pluto pipeline and a fuel dump, armed with a pickaxe handle and an Alsatian dog. One volunteer, Richard Needham, who had guarded the Pluto power station at Brown's Golf Course, Sandown, said, "The Germans landing on the island in the form of a counterattack had to be stopped at all costs. The volunteers were on duty during the initial bombardment of the French coast. The ground shook under their feet with the constant shelling. I watched as the planes flew out over the channel, towing the guide gliders and the vast fleet sail into the distance. It was awesome." Men had also operated patrols from a temporary headquarters next to Parkhurst Prison, and some were based on Culver Down, tasked with operating a radio station. And there are varied photographs showing the interiors of the bunkers that they used to live in and some of their weapons, and a big picture of the West Wight resistance fighters, Dad's army in other words, known only as Group 10, reputed to have taken the former Sun Inn in Wellow. Although many of the men have been named, confirmation of their identification is still required. It'd be rather tricky because they're very small, but there you are. If you still watch the BBC's programmes, then it's like living there.
And so we've just got one more article from the that we're reading from the County Press. The £30,000 13-page plan for parking. The £30,000 cost of an island parking plan, which amounts to just 13 pages, has come under fire for stating the obvious. Drawn up by consultancy firm White Young Green, the strategy makes recommendations such as short-stay parking should be prioritised on sites within a short walking distance of shops, and on residential roads, priority should be given to meeting residents' parking needs. Another recommendation advises the council seeks to provide additional parking where excessive parking stress is identified. At last week's Scrutiny Committee meeting, Councillor Wayne Whittle said, "We employed consultants who borrowed our watch to tell us the time. However, the cost was defended by Councillor Gordon Kendall, the executive member responsible for parking last week when the strategy was approved by the executive but has since resigned, who described it as a skeleton on which local parking plans would add flesh. When asked by the county press if he thought it offered value for money, he said, "It was the sort of document our own officers could have produced, but I think having it done by an outside body gives it more authority. Members can be very single-minded about parking, and it needed distance from the council, so it was not seen to be party political. Given the cost of consultants generally, I think it was value for money."
And that's all we have for you this week. And so it's goodbye from me, Peter.
And goodbye from Madeline.
This is a download from the BBC. For more information and our terms of use, go to www.bbc.co.uk/in-touch.
Bus Express service connects 1 to Dublin Airport, Dublin City Centre, Paris. Is now boarding with staff 14.
Good evening from Belfast's very busy main bus station, which is full of people rushing in all directions after a day's work. I'll be setting off from here around Northern Ireland to meet 3 people who prove that the visually impaired and human spirit can be indomitable. In a country whose love for music is legendary, it's almost inevitable that I'll run into people who've made it an integral part of their lives. Maybe less predictable, however, anywhere in the United Kingdom is laughter yoga.
And this week, I am very excited because I am recording a piece for In Touch.
I'm now on a bus heading to Omagh, which is just over an hour and a half from Belfast. I'm going to meet up with Claire Bowes, who, at the age of 15, lost her sight in the Omagh bombing of 1998.
Hi, Tom.
It's Tom from the In Touch programme. How are you doing?
Doing good, thank you. I'll get the kettle on.
Brilliant.
I remember sort of being thrown to the ground, and I had no sight straight away, but at that time thought that maybe just some dirt or something had got into my eyes. Never for 1 second sort of realised the extent of my injuries. I knew that I had lost a lot of blood because I'd had to cut my jeans and that off me because to check for other injuries. But the only injuries I actually had was across the bridge of my nose. So I was in surgery that night when I got there, and that was to remove a piece of metal. I then spent a further 2 weeks in hospital where I had another few surgeries, one of which was to remove my right eye. And I remember at the time when they told me they were going to have to remove my right eye, I was devastated. You know, I was 15. Up until this stage, everything in my life had been completely normal. And I was being dealt this blow that I was having an eye removed. And I sort of, you know, all the usual things. God, what am I going to look like? Is it going to look really different? Nobody's going to be interested in me with only one eye, you know, all these sort of thoughts. But anyway, there was nothing could be done. When I initially lost my sight on the 15th of August, I didn't get out of bed for a week because I was too scared to. I couldn't cope. I suppose it was the whole trauma of it, maybe some denial, but I was too afraid to get out of bed. And then I got home sort of at the end of August, so I was at home for a week or so. So then did start having to try and make my way around a bit myself. And it was a strange experience because like it was a house that was so familiar to me beforehand, and I had to relearn everything again.
Was it one of those houses that was full of ornaments and things that a visually impaired person could knock over?
Not so much, but I'm the oldest of 5. So I was 15 at the time. My youngest sister was 5. So there was like toys and things
to trip over.
Yeah, because you know it never was an issue before. So it was a learning experience for everyone at home because they then had to start keeping things out of my way and you know becoming more aware. So it was a big, like it was life changing for the whole family. I can't say that there was just a particular time when I was like, sort of, this is it. But that, probably around that time when my consultant told me that I was never going to see again, I suppose that was sort of the reality check, sort of, right, this is how it is.
I've been reading quite a bit about you, and I don't know if this is true, but I hear you were back in school within weeks.
Yeah, I was so bored. You know, I had nothing to do.
How did your teachers react to you when you went back as a totally blind person? And the other students as well?
There was never any issue. My teachers were fantastic. They would have sat and recorded notes onto, which was then cassette tapes for me. They did everything they could to help me as much as they could. There was never any issue with the rest of the girls in my class or my year or anything.
So you did your GCSEs and A-level,
Yeah.
and then went to Queen's
Yeah.
to study music.
Yeah.
How was that?
I loved it. Again, I was just determined that I was just going to follow the path that I should be following. I always wanted a career in music, so that was what I always would have done.
But music's always been a love of yours, and I know you worked
Yeah.
at RNIB
Yeah.
for a while, but you left RNIB and you set up a music academy here in Omagh.
Yeah.
Hi Claire,
Hi Kiva, how are you?
Good.
How did you get on this week?
Good, yeah.
Any issues or anything? Or are we happy enough with everything?
There's probably a few parts, but I'll go from the start.
Go from the start and see how it goes.
You're in charge of quite a big operation now, 140
Yeah.
odd students. What are the challenges for you as a visually impaired person of running that type of music academy?
I suppose I'm very fortunate in that I have fantastic staff. All the tutors are extremely like-minded and we all help each other out. So I will go to them with queries, obviously, about what's written on the sheet music, because I teach all my students to read music. And because I used to read music, I'm able to do that. But the business side, the less fun side, has to be done too.
Is it lots of access technology?
Yeah, I have my laptop that I use with VoiceOver. I have a Mac, and I would be lost without it. Can we just stop it at the end of that section there, Kiva?
Yeah.
Do you see how, as you're playing that, you're kind of hesitating before you...
Are there any aspects of your job where you occasionally think, God, I wish I could see?
Yeah, all the time. Obviously, it would be much easier to teach if I could see, because I would know exactly what my students are doing and I would know exactly what's on the page. Like, I have to go and listen to the music and learn the music that I'm going to teach every student myself, and I have well over 30 students, so there's a lot of planning involved, and if I could just lift the sheet music and look at it, it would be much easier. But I love it. Mess it up in the middle.
I can't quite remember who said this, but I've heard that laughter is the music of the soul. If that's the case, they'll be making plenty of music here at the Bridge Community Centre in Lisbon. While many of us will be familiar with yoga, laughter yoga is certainly new to me. Apparently laughter can have a whole range of therapeutic benefits, and it isn't as new as I thought it was. Joanna Toner is totally blind and is about to get the latest of her laughter yoga sessions underway. Joanna, what is laughter yoga?
Well, laughter yoga was created about 23 years ago by a cardiologist in India. And he was very concerned about the general health of his patients and wanted to do something to improve things in general for people. So he got together with a few of his friends in a park in Mumbai, and they just started telling jokes for each other. And within a couple of days, the group had grown in popularity and everybody turned up on these days to have a good laugh, really. But what they discovered after a while is that the jokes ran out. So Dr. Madan Kataria, who was the fellow who started all this off, he went away and did some research, and he discovered that our bodies cannot tell the difference between real laughter and simulated laughter. So he created a series of exercises and games that can help us simulate some laughter and get the same effects as if we were with our best friends having a good laugh or watching our favourite comedy.
So, to start off with, because we're all a little bit rusty, we haven't done this for a month, we need to warm up our laughs. So, I'm going to start off, and I want everybody to introduce themselves and then laugh and tell me one thing about your week and then laugh.
Hello, I'm Katie. And this week I went to the gym and did an exercise class, and my arm has been killing me ever since.
One of the objectives appears to be to encourage people to lose their inhibitions. Do you find that as a blind person that really helps you?
Yes, because most of us who come here are visually impaired. There is this sort of sensation of, well, nobody can see me anyway, so why should I worry? I have noticed occasionally somebody comes who's never been before, and, you know, you have to kind of almost be overly welcoming so as they don't feel out of place.
Musical orchestra. This is music of the soul is laughter, so now we're going to prove it. Pick an instrument and play it laughing.
My name is Adam. And I spent Wednesday afternoon getting lots of food at Belfast Market.
What skills do you use to teach the sessions? Because obviously you can't actually see what the people taking part are doing.
Yeah, that can be quite difficult, and it's taken a little bit of getting used to. And some groups are better than others. It depends on the dynamic of the group. With a fresh group that I've never taught before, I'm very open, and I tell the group that I can't see what they're doing, and I can't see if they're running into any trouble. So I make it the group responsibility to look out for each other and for people to take responsibility for how they're feeling. And I'm not going to pick up on it. I think that's probably a lesson for life as well, that we do need to take responsibility for how we feel and you speak up.
I'm Shelley. I'm a South African. I've been living in Northern Ireland for about 24 years.
Now, you're fully sighted and Joe is totally blind. Mm-hmm. How does that work from your point of view? How well does she interact with the group?
I don't really see a difference between a sighted instructor and Joe, because Joe is very aware of what's going on. What I've observed from knowing Joe is that she can hear the different nuances.
My name's Lynn. And we have had a distinguished guest staying with us this week.
And I think that Tom should join in.
I think Tom should do it.
Yeah. Right, so introduce yourself, please, Tom.
I'm struggling to maintain my composure. My name is Tom. I've had an interesting week, a week of two halves. The second half of the week has been spent here in Northern Ireland, which has been amazing, as it always is.
Excellent. And as we do at the end of every laughter exercise, we do some clapping. So it's ho, ho, ha, ha, ha. Ho, ho, ha, ha, ha.
It's about increasing your confidence and trying to get to your comfort zone. And you don't learn or improve or become tougher unless you push yourself.
The artist with the most viewer votes tonight, and therefore the winner of The Voice 2013 is... It's Andrea!
In 2013, Andrea Begley, who's visually impaired, won the BBC talent contest The Voice. The aim of the show is to find a pop star based on their voice and not their appearance. In the early stages of the competition, judges sit with their backs to the contestants and base their judgments on what they can hear.
In the arms of the angel, flying away from here, from this dark, cold hotel room, and the endlessness that you feel.
I've come to the Crescent Arts Centre near Queen's University in Belfast to have a chat with Andrea. Andrea, you've performed in here, haven't you?
Yes, that's right, Tom. I've had the privilege of performing in the Crescent Arts Centre and attending a number of their classes on Irish traditional singing and on songwriting as well.
The angel, may you find.
The opportunity to perform in The Voice came along for me as a bit of a coincidence. It actually came through a contact of a friend of mine in music circles in Belfast who said that the judges were coming from the production side over to Belfast to maybe look at some talent that might be interested in performing in the show. I think it did appeal to me, the fact that the judges wouldn't look at you and wouldn't be judging you on your appearance and maybe on your stage performance if you were moving around or doing all the other things that people typically expect from musicians or pop singers, if you like.
In the arms of the angel, fly away from here.
It must be quite difficult for you as a visually impaired person with very limited vision to feel totally comfortable on a stage, especially in a television studio.
There's certainly a number of barriers there, and in a way people might say actually we have an advantage because we can't see all the cameras and the lights and all the hundreds of people staring you in the face, which possibly is true, but equally you can find difficulties with just even getting on and off the stage can be a challenge. But I was with the production staff who were always very helpful and very friendly.
I know from my own experience, just even having my photo taken, I find it hard to look properly at the camera, directly at it. How did you find that in terms of television cameras?
It's definitely difficult. There were cameras really at all angles, up above and to the sides, and really I was reliant very much on the production staff leading me to the correct part of the stage and indicating to me how I should direct my body or what direction I should look. But certainly it is a bit of a difficult one, and you want to make sure you're facing the audience and not not facing sideways.
How did you deal with the dilemma of announcing that you do have a visual impairment?
I actually thought that I would be able to tell if the judges had turned because I'd hear the noise. There's usually a noise whenever their seats turn or they press the button. But I actually found out later that noise doesn't happen in the studio. It's superimposed then after, whenever the editing is done, with the result that whenever I got to the end of my audition, genuinely I had absolutely no idea if anyone turned because I hadn't heard anything to even give me any sort of audible cues really. And I think I just dealt with it fairly naturally and just said, look, I'm visually impaired. I don't actually know if anyone's turned round. And then at that point, Danny O'Donoghue announced that both himself and Tom Jones had.
By the final, you had, of course, made it clear, made it public that you're visually impaired. Did that have an effect on anything, do you think?
I do recall reading some of the articles that had a bit of a slant about, has this girl got to where she has simply because she's visually impaired, and going down the whole route of, is this a bit of a sympathy vote scenario, or is this person actually talented? And I did find those a bit challenging simply because I entered the show as a singer first and foremost. My visual impairment is something that's a part of me, and that I deal with it on a daily basis, and I've adapted to it, and that's that. While there are parts of the industry that are very ruthless, I also feel that there are parts of the industry that still reach out to authentic musicians, to singers who want to be more than just the traditional pop package, if you like.
So when I say hi, it means do you miss me at all? When I say I'm fine, it means why don't you come?
I think the best advice I would give anybody is that if you really want to do it, just give it a go and give it your best shot. And I wouldn't definitely say that you need to feel in any way inhibited because of your vision, and I think that's really the approach most visually impaired people take with life in general. We don't let a lot of things hold us back. In particular, sometimes when people do tell you you can't do something, it almost makes you more determined to do it.